Hello guys, my name is Remik, and in today's video we are going to use the Quartz dotnet library to schedule some repeatable task to delete the logs from the database. We're gonna simulate the scenario that we have logs stored in the database. We're gonna set the threshold amount of days after which they have to be removed. It could be, for instance, 180 days. And then this job, based on the Quartz settings, will call the database and remove those logs. If you liked this video, then please hit the subscribe button, like button, and also give the comment your opinion, what you have seen, what could be improved, what you have learned. It will help me a lot just to adjust and improve for the next videos. The first thing to do, we are going to set up the connection to the database, so Entity Framework Core. So just to get started, I will create the layer called persistence, and this persistence layer will have the DB context and also another layer for the contracts, and it will have our entity called log. So I am creating the new project called worker.persistence, and also I'll create another class library called contracts, worker.contracts. And as I have said, we have to create the directory called entities. And in here, we are creating the log entity. So log will contain the created, so the most probably what you'll see in the databases if they are storing the logs. So it will be created. So it will be date time created. Also, it has to have, for instance, the message from the exception, maybe the stack trace, and the log level. We're going to create the log level enum, log level. And over there as well, log level, and it's gonna be enum. We have debug log level, error, info, and warning. Just gonna leave it as it is. So our entity is done. The next thing to do is to create the DB context. Worker DB context, and we have to inherit from the DB context. We don't have any nuggets installed yet, so we have to install the Entity Framework Core related nuggets. So it will be this nugget, relational, SQL Server, because we are going to use the SQL Server, and the design, and we are going to create constructor base, and we will pass the DB context options. DB context options, and we'll simply pass those here. Now we are going to set up the connection to the database. So we are using the services.add_db context. We have to pass worker DB context here, options, and then options use SQL Server. And we have to pass here the connection string to our database. So we'll use the host context, then configuration, get connection string, and we'll pass the name db connection string. We are almost done. We have to add the DB connection string. So the app settings JSON, we are creating the new section called connection strings array, and we will add DB connection string, and I'll just copy paste. It will look like this. Now we have to install also the nuggets, so the Entity Framework core, also the relational SQL Server, because we are using the SQL Server, and the design. In order to create our first migration, we have to remember that we have to set the DB set, and also to assign the primary key, so the ID of our entity. So going to the log, we missed to add the ID, so it will be public int ID, and also the public DB set logs get set. Now we are ready to go to create our first migration based on the database first approach. So we are specifying .NET Entity Framework migrations at init, where we have our configuration, and also where we are storing our DB context. Now, as you see, we have the new folder called migrations and the initial migration called create table, logs, and all of our fields, so the columns. To execute this migration, we have to add one more command. That will be .NET Entity Framework database update, and we are specifying as well the same settings as before. As you see, it created for us the new database with our log entity. Now I will connect to our database to check if actually it exists. So data source, SQL Server, and I have to actually copy paste the connection string to our database in order to allow Rider to connect to our database. So data source, SQL Server, URL over there, apply, and connect. We have our worker DB. It will load. We have our DBO. Can specify all schemas to see that it actually exists. So in the meantime, we'll see the tables, so the migrations history, and also the logs with all the columns: ID, message, stack trace, log level, and created. Now we can create the log repository. So the repository that will be used for deletion of logs. So basically we can add to our persistence layer directory called repositories. And in here, we'll create a class called log repository. This log repository will take, of course, the DB context as an parameter. So we're gonna use private read-only worker DB context, and in here worker DB context, DB context, and we'll assign the dependency. And we'll create the method called public async task remove logs after period of time, and it will take date time date. We have to extract also the interface, so it will be log repository, and this log repository will take this method. It will be in the contracts, so we'll create also a directory called repositories. And the class interface log repository. And we'll import this. So now we have to fetch those logs. So we need also to filter them. Logs to delete, DB context logs were created will be less than date. Now we have to use DB context remove range, logs to delete, and then to save changes async, and we have to add await. Now we have to add our repository to our dependency injection container. So we have to add services add scoped ilog repository log repository in order to be able to use this in our job that we'll very soon create. Now we are going to create the seeder. So the seeder that will generate for us the fake data to our brand new created database. So in our persistence layer, I'll create the seeder class. That will be the static one. And it will have actually one method, seed. And it will take our worker DB context as the parameter. Now we are ready to feed our database with the fake log data. So we're gonna create faker new faker of type log, and now we are creating the rules for each one of our columns in the database. So rule for created will be date in the past. The next rule will be for the message. and it will be the pick random. Also for the stack trace, it will be pick random. Stack trace, and also the log level pick random log level. And for the message and the stack trace, I'll just very fast create some lists that will have some randomly generated messages and also the stack traces for the logs. Okay, now we'll just pass this messages list here and also the stack traces. Now we have to create the list of this fake data. So the fake logs, it will be faker generate between, it will be 200. Then we are using our DB context to add range of our fake logs, and also DB context save changes. Now we are ready to use our seeder in the startup of the application. So using var scope to be host services create scope, also scope service provider DB context service provider get service worker DB context. If DB context will not be null, then and only then we'll use our seeder seed and DB context as the parameter. Okay, and now we're gonna close this, and actually we have to run our application in order to check if our seeder will work and add for us the fake data. So as you see, it generated for us a lot of fake data. So going to the database, I will show you how it looks like. DBO, tables, logs, and I'll create new query console, select everything from logs. As you see, it created for us the fake data. Now we can check how many of those logs actually are older than 180 days. So we'll create some simple select count statement. Select count from logs where created is less than get date minus 180, so it's 114. So then after executing our job, we have to delete 114 of those. So going to the Explorer, I will go to our seeder, and once we have our data injected to the database, I will create the if statement if dbContext logs count is less than 50, for instance, then only then create this data and feed our database. Now we can create finally our job. So over there, I'll create directory called jobs. I will add delete logs job cs, and I will inherit from the iJob. We have to, of course, install some nuggets in order to use the Quartz. So we need Quartz, and also we need the Quartz hosting nugget, but it will be done in the program CS. So adding this, implementing members, public async task, of course, and we can inject private read-only ilog repository, log repository, create the constructor, ilog repository, log repository, and assign in the constructor itself. Now we can create the options for our job. So I will add directory called options, and in here I will create the delete logs job options and public const string this name. It will be useful for us in the program CS, and then public int amount of days. Now we are ready to add our options to the program CS, but before doing that, we have to specify the settings in the app-settings.json file. So going to the app-settings.json, we're gonna create delete logs job section, and in here it will be amount of days. I will set 180, and then cron schedule, and this cron schedule will be the schedule for the job to be executed. So for the demonstration purposes, it will be every 5 seconds. Going back to the program CS, we are specifying the services, configure delete logs job options, and here context of the host builder context, configuration, get section, and now we are using this const string from the options. So it was delete logs job options and the same name as the const string. Now we can take our options into use. So we're gonna create the new private read-only integer value called amount of days. To the parameter we have to add iOptions, delete logs job options called options, and here amount of days are equal to options value amount of days. If it will be null, then we are throwing the new argument exception. Amount of days cannot be null. As I see, we specify that it will be always the value, but we are not sure. But here, yes. So we are converting the amount of days to the datetime value. So var date, it will be datetime now add those days and amount of days. So the negative value of amount of days. And we are calling the log repository remove logs after period of time, and we are passing the date. We have to await this call, and we are ready to go. Now we can set up our Quartz in the program.cs file. So we have to make sure that our Nugget packages are here. So I'll just remove this and add Quartz extensions. Sting services add Quartz. So we have all our nuggets available, and we are using the options. And now the first option is to use the Microsoft dependency injection job factory. So use Microsoft dependency injection job factory. The next thing to do is just to create the job key. So what will differentiate our job with the other jobs. So job key, it will be new job key, delete logs job. Now we can add the job. So add job, delete logs job with the options called with identity job key. We have to add as well the trigger. So add trigger. And this trigger has, of course, the options. So options for job and our job key. Then with the identity, because also the trigger has to have the special identity. So it will be delete logs job trigger, for instance. And then we have to add the with the cron schedule method. So with cron schedule, and we are taking to use our upsetting.json cron schedule value. So context configuration get section, delete logs job, and the child inside cron schedule. It was the value. And now, if it will be null, then also we have to assign some value. So for us, it will be the same. So every 5 seconds, only just for the demo purposes. And the last thing to do is to set up also the hosted Quartz service, because the service that is triggering the jobs is the hosted service, but the Quartz does for us this creation. So add Quartz hosted service, and it will be wait for jobs to complete, and we can assign this to true because we would like just to complete those jobs. And the last thing to do is just to add the special attribute. This is the very useful, just not to allow the concurrent jobs to be executed. So this allow concurrent execution of the jobs. Now we will set a couple of breakpoints to show you how it works like. So going to the log repository, we'll just add this and this. One breakpoint here. The next one will be inside of the job. Okay, we are almost ready to go, but I have noticed one big issue, that we don't have the same value here as we have in the upsettings.json. So delete logs job options has to be changed to the delete logs job to be compliant with what we have in our upsettings.json. So I can show you, I mean, this section. So I'm gonna debug and we'll check how our job works like. As you see, we have the context of the job. It has been triggered. We have the date time, amount of days, and going further, we have the logs to delete. We have the results. We have the logs. And now we can check in our database what are the results. So query console, select from logs, select count from logs, and as you see, this is the value that was expected. So we don't have any logs that are older than 180 days. Now just a confirmation, select count from logs where created is less than get date minus our desired 180 is 0. So our job was executed successfully. All of the logs were deleted. So if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button, like button, and write some comment how you're using the jobs from the Quartz library.